Maker of man, who from thy throne dost order all things, God alone, by whose decree the teeming earth to reptile and to beast gave birth.
Hello, it's Father Vogel. I am in Makoshika State Park in some of the Minnesota Badlands, and I'm just taking a break in some shade formed by the overhang of a dry riverbed. And I've been going through some commentary reflecting upon Pope Francis's Encyclical Laudato Si on our common home and different environmental issues. In the first chapter, Pope Francis goes through a number of issues as to our current state of the way things are and certain problems that are rising. And one that he mentions is pollution. And this came to my mind as I was going by because I noticed on this sandstone wall here in this riverbed, people have wanted to leave their mark. And so they've drawn their names, in other words, into the side of this sandstone riverbank. And to a certain degree, we do leave our mark on the world, and that's a good thing. But sometimes, we do it at the defacement of the beauty of God's creation around us. For example, I can think of one place that really destroys the beauty of our history, of our culture, is in Indian Cave State Park in Nebraska. One of my favorite places to go, but there's a place where there is some sandstone caves, and early Native American tribes etched different drawings into the stone, but through the years people have come and visited and they've done exactly the same thing. They've drawn their names everywhere, and you can barely find where the original Native American markings were in the first place. And so it's really because of people wanting to leave their mark on this kind of self-centeredness. They may not think of it when they're doing that, but they ended up destroying an important part of our history in our area in Nebraska. But there's other forms of, so I think this could be a form of pollution in one sense. Even on my driving here, on my way from my sister and brother-in-law's place, I noticed a vehicle in front of me throw a aluminum can out the window. And having been reading the Pope's Encyclical, it's just like, how can we do something like that? Can we not hold on to that and throw it away at a proper time or recycle that? I think that's just a normal thing that we ought to do, not because, we're, super green, but because that's just what we ought to do, especially as Christians, as Catholics. In his encyclical, Pope Francis, in very strong terms, he talks about, turning our world into so much filth. So we do need to be careful there because there's so many sources of pollution. And it's in that chapter, in that section where he talks about climate change, where a lot of people, there's a lot of opinions about, what's the extent of climate change and global warming caused by human beings. And it's not so much that Pope Francis takes a position on it as to, he simply, I think, is trying to reiterate just what scientists have told him. He's not trying to take any position. But the most important spiritual position that he takes is the background behind these issues. What's behind the issue of pollution is, he says, our throwaway culture. We use something and very quickly it becomes trash. We don't need it anymore, and so we get something new and better. Even the way things are made nowadays, they're not made to last. We don't fix things once they break. We just simply throw them out and get new ones. And so he says, we have to look at the way in which we produce and consume things, because we don't produce and consume things like the natural world. The natural world in its cycles are able to reuse a lot of the things that are produced. But in our man-made cycles of production and consumption, we're not able to do that without producing unusable waste that ends up defacing large parts of our world. Definitely are large parts of our world still left that are not defaced, so it's actually very hard to find something like this where there's this effect of us on nature here in the Badlands. It's very remote, and it's hard for us to get to and to do anything to. But many of us do, especially if we live in cities or in highly populated areas. Pollution can definitely have an effect on our daily lives, and Pope Francis especially calls for us to especially take care of those who are poor, because usually those are the ones that pollution affects first. God bless.
The mighty forms that fill the land, instinct with life at thy command, are given subdued to humankind, for service in their rank assigned.